Hey, sparklers. It's time yet again for another uplifting, motivational, inspirational episode of Ignite Your Spark. I'm your host, Kim Duff Selby, and I am here to bring you women who will uplift you and help you step out of your comfort zone to receive more joy, happiness, and purpose in midlife and beyond. Today, my guest is Tracey Gates. And Tracey is a good friend of a couple of my good friends. And who knew? I didn't know it until I was introduced to her book. And her book just has moved me beyond beyond tears, beyond shivers, and it's called The Power of a Few Kind Words. Tracey is a kindness ambassador, and she is the kind of person that I think we should all aspire to be. And yes, I use that word intentionally. Tracey is also a life and wellness coach and a speaker, and has been featured in Maria Shriver's Sunday paper, something I read religiously. She also has a workshop based on her book called A Few Kind Words. And I am so excited to talk to her about this. The full title is A Few Kind Words, The Power of Writing Unexpected Letters of Appreciation. She lives in Pennington, New Jersey. And welcome, Tracey. Thank you for being on Ignite Your Spark.
Oh, I am so happy to be here. And the fact that we have these friends in common, I know that you are a new friend of mine, and thank you for the work you do.
Oh, and thank you. I am just delighted to be connected to you. The minute I read your book, I was like, yep, that's a girl for me. We are kindred souls. Before we get into your story and how you got to writing a few kind words every day for a year, I would love to ask you, Tracey, how do you ignite your spark?
Oh, I love that question. No one's ever asked me that before. Um, and I think it's engaging meaningfully with other people. You know, I've always just found that I feel most uplifted and nourished when I've had authentic conversations with people, when we can go a little bit deep, and I feel like we're really seeing one another. And to sit in conversation and have a girls' gab fest forever is absolute joy. And now with this journey that we can talk about in a few minutes, but it's made me start to slow down and linger and engage with people in a way that I did not so authentically do. And now I just love to find conversations that are meaningful.
That's beautiful. And that is one of the things that ignites my spark. If I'm feeling a little down and I have a podcast episode, I'm right back up there. You know, the spark is ignited because I'm connecting. Connection is so key, I think, especially now more than ever. And because I read your book, I do know a lot about you, but I am curious, how did you become a life coach? I'm assuming that you had a former career or passion that you transitioned into. And just briefly, because I do want to get into the words of kindness, but just briefly, I know people like to know, how did you do this? How did you get into it?
Well, I will say that my journey, I think, is probably very typical of many people. But what I really want to convey is that it's never too late to find your passion and your purpose. And so I was privileged to be a stay-at-home mom for 19 years. When our youngest was a junior in high school, I went back to work as the director of alumni at Princeton Day School, where she was going to school. And I did that for many years. And it was great. I loved it. I loved the people that I worked with, but I could tell it was not, I didn't feel like it was really fueling what I was meant to do on this earth. And after I left that, I became a CASA, court appointed special advocate for children in the foster system, which was deeply meaningful. And then somebody said to me to do this exercise where you really think about what would other people say are your gifts. And I asked a number of my friends, and I really thought about what it is that I love to do. What is my spark? And when it came down to it's being in authentic conversation with people, it just led me to the idea of becoming a life and wellness coach. And I became certified in my mid 50s, and it was absolutely an aha moment. It was like the light was turned on, and I felt like I'd been a life coach my whole life. I just never had a title or a certificate. And it really became my joy. And I thought that I had fully found my purpose, having coaching individual clients. And then from that came my journey of writing a few kind words. And now that I feel absolutely is what my purpose is on this earth.
I think that's so cool that you were able to do that. I feel like I'm sort of there, but again, you know, you just there's always something. And one of the modules in my online course is called Finding Your Purpose and Passion in Midlife, you know, because it is something that not everybody stumbles onto or finds. And I've done that same exact exercise probably 15 years ago. I asked people, what are my gifts? You know, and they came
Yeah.
up with all these things. And it's like, yeah, great, but how do I use those? You know, so it is challenging sometimes for some people to do that. Let's talk about the book as people will be watching this on YouTube and also listening to it. And I see behind you the picture of your very handsome, twinkling eyed dad.
Oh,
And I saw
yes.
his picture in the book and I just felt this spark coming out of him. Let's talk about how you got into the kindness arena.
Sure. So it really, it's my whole journey has become a legacy of love to my dad. And I didn't realize that's sort of what it was going to be when I started. But so, the quick version of this is that my adored dad was just everything to me. He was a friend to everybody. He was a jolly kind of a guy, and he never had a negative word to say about anybody living in a household of girls. And but he had this one very annoying habit, and that is whenever any of us asked him what he wanted for his birthday or for Christmas, he always said the same thing. He said, "All I want is a few kind words." And we hated that, right? I mean, that just like, great dad, I love you, but how do you wrap that up and put it under the tree? So we'd give him, a tie. And my sister and I gave him a puppy, a real life puppy one year. All he wanted was a few kind words. And we just kind of brushed that off. And when I was 24 and newly engaged for 4 weeks, I was living in Boston and my fiance was living in his own apartment, as was done back in the day. But he happened to be over early one Saturday morning and the phone rang and he went to answer it. And I said, "Do not answer that phone. It could be my mother and you are not supposed to be here." And I answered the phone and I heard my mother's voice. And she said 3 words that changed my life. She said, "Honey, daddy died." And he had a heart attack on the tennis court in his regular Saturday morning game. And I was 24, he was 67, and he would never get to walk me down the aisle, and I would never get to give him a few kind words.
Mhm.
And that always resonated with me. I sort of tucked it away in my heart and in my mind, but I didn't really understand it at the time. And it wasn't until in my mid 50s when I became a life and wellness coach that I really began to embrace what it was that my dad was brave enough to ask for. And that was words of affirmation. That was his love language. And, I started to realize that we have the same love language. That's always been so important to me is words of affirmation, sharing what you appreciate about somebody. And, around that time, I started caring for my mother who was aging. I also myself developed an autoimmune disease. And then the world started to just bombard us with negative news all the time. And I just decided that I needed to do something that could tip the scales back towards positivity in my life. And I just had this completely random idea flying to Portland, Oregon to meet our brand new grandchild. I just had this thought, what if I, you know, um, wrote an unexpected letter of appreciation to a different person every single day? Could that make me feel that joy that was sort of slipping away? Could I feel happier when I started to connect with people very deliberately? And I will tell you that it was only within a few weeks I could feel the most beautiful transition in my life. And it just turned into a journey that I never could have imagined at the time. But I called it just for myself, a few kind words. And I brought my dad along on that journey. 33 years after he passed away, I would say, "All right, Dad, who are we writing to today?" And, it just became something that it changed the energy in my world.
It is very, very special what you have chosen to do in the path that you are following. And I want to just go back to a couple of things and share something
Mhm.
with you. When I was 22, my mom died. When I was 28, my father died of a heart attack at the gym.
Oh,
He was 66. So
oh my goodness, Kim.
I
I'm so
know.
sorry. I can feel the pain.
You,
Mm,
when I was reading that about you, I was like, whoa, I am right there with you, girl.
wow.
I hear that. And what my father was very joyful and very gregarious and very outgoing. And other people who've listened to this podcast know I found out when my mom died, I found out I had been adopted. And then that was a whole other
Wow.
and okay, so I have a couple of things that I wrote down from your book that I wanted to talk about, but I
Mhm.
didn't know I would talk about it right now. But one of the things well, okay, I'm going to go back a second. Yes, I know this is weird, but said that words of affirmation were your father's love language, and I know not everybody you calls themselves. Well, let's see, how do I say that? Not everybody would say that that is their love language. However, I would say based on reading your book and what you did, that that's every single person's love language, whether they know it or not,
Oh,
Be- because of what you have
yeah.
done and the responses you got. I mean, people
Yeah.
know it, how important that is, right?
Oh, Kim, you are so right. Um, I think that's the thing that surprised me the most very early on in the journey was how deeply moved people were by my notes. And again, it's not that I am a great writer. It's simply that I took the time to say, I see you. You matter. And my mission in life now is to help people everywhere know that they matter. And it was a real sort of sad, eye-opening experience to understand how infrequently people are told that they matter. And there is not a person alive. So to your point, there is not a person alive who does not respond uh, deep in their soul with gratitude for being told something positive about themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I am so in agreement and in sync with everything you said, I have a lot of things I wrote down.
Well, that's good. I'm glad to hear it. It
Oh,
resonated.
absolutely. One of the things you actually brought up in your intro is lingering, that you
Mm,
took the time to linger, which we don't very often do, especially people like myself.
yeah,
I do find that people over a certain age linger a little bit more than we did when
right.
we were younger. It was a great reminder to me that I do not linger enough. But I like that you said that is something so powerful. When we are lingering, we're taking time. And
Mm.
everything you said about writing these letters, but I loved that terminology, lingering. It's a word we don't think about
Isn't it? I
positive.
actually contemplated if I wasn't so completely married to the title, "The Power of a Few Kind Words," because of my dad. To me, there was no choice in the title. I actually thought I would love to name the book "Linger"
Mhm.
or "Lingering,"
Well, maybe
because
I don't know.
what was that?
Maybe that's your next book.
Oh, maybe that's my next book. Exactly. But I invite everybody, all of your listeners, to just consider what lingering means. You're just staying a few seconds longer, a few minutes longer after a meeting. You're actually asking a question to the cashier at the checkout line, and you're waiting for the answer. You're listening, you're engaging, you're making eye contact, and it feels joyful to know that you have actually had a 30-second connection, a 5-minute connection, whatever it is. It feels great on both sides, I really believe.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm such a big proponent of this. One thing my father used to do, and we don't do this anymore, but you know how you used to go through toll booths and you'd throw a quarter in to get for
Sure.
Dad used to throw a quarter for himself. And then if there was a toll booth guy, he'd give the guy a quarter for the person behind him.
Oh, I love that.
And I,
That's
yeah,
beautiful.
yeah, isn't that great? I have done that at Starbucks. I have bought someone a coffee
Yes.
behind me, and that's one of the things you talk about too. It's so
Mhm.
simple though. I've used this example. I go to the grocery store a lot. I go every day because I like to have fresh food. And I will often get a different cashier, or sometimes I do it myself, but I always see them and look at them because they're service people who are doing this kind of crappy job, basically, and give them a compliment, whether it is about their hair or their earrings or their nails. And I'm talking men too, that look like that.
Yeah.
It makes you feel better. And that's not why you do it. I do it genuinely because I want to be kind.
Right.
I think that's what we have to know. It's important to really be kind, not for what you're going to get, but for what the other person's going to receive.
Absolutely. And although I will say that what's very important to me in my book is that when you write these letters, you don't write them with any expectation to receive something back. And that's really the joy, is that it made me, the writer, find my nourishment again, find my joy in just knowing. It felt so good to know that I was complimenting somebody, and that itself was really the beauty of it. However, I will say that I did hear back from hundreds of my letter recipients, and I heard the same thing over 150 times, the same words: "You made my day." And I got to tell you, it feels pretty good to know that something that I did made somebody's day. But I will always tell you that it made my day first before it made their day. And every single one of us has the time to do this. We all say, "Oh, we're so busy." I'm telling you that I wrote a lot of these notes in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
It just, I mean, you can write them as long as you want, or, I mean, I wrote on 4 by 6 inch folded over note cards, and I wrote usually on the top and the bottom. However, I'm a big proponent of the Post-it note, the back of a receipt, a napkin, whatever paper you have handy. If a kind thought crosses your mind about somebody that you're with, please share it in as simple a form as possible, or as long and complicated as you want it to be. Because, often we think, "Oh, somebody knows how I feel," or, "Oh, they'll think it's weird that I'm doing this." And I am here to tell you, after having written hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these letters, that no matter what place somebody is in, it feels good to receive this. And I also realize most of the time, we have no idea what's going on in someone's life. We all walk around with what I like to call fine face. Everything's fine, everything's fine. And what I've come to realize is there were countless people told me I was in a really bad place when I got your letter, and your letter turned my day around. So I just want you all to consider that being interested in those around us is truly the kindest thing that we can do for ourselves and for others. And to don't keep that thought to yourself. It is always received. If it's written authentically, it is received that way.
Yeah. I have often said to people, when you're not feeling great, do something for someone else, and you can't
Yes.
but get lifted out of that state. It's, whether you're volunteering or whether you are writing a letter or whether it's a condolence letter, because a lot of people, even when it comes to writing a condolence letter, have a very hard time, a challenging time, when all you have to do is say, "I'm sorry for your loss. I loved your human, whatever I loved your,"
Exactly.
I know how that affects you. I think
Yeah.
we overthink things too. And where it can be so much simpler, right?
We do. I love that. I actually say in my book, don't overthink this. And because people start going, "Oh, people are, I have terrible penmanship. People are going to think I want something." They start, just trust me on this. Just let that go. People are overwhelmed by the warmth of the gesture. They don't care if you write, if it's like chicken scratch, as long as you can read the words. People, they're not going to second guess you. They're just not. And so I say, keep it simple, keep it sincere, and be specific. And that's really the special sauce, is to don't just say, "I appreciate you," but tell them why. That's what makes somebody save the letter, read it more than once, tear up. And again, it can be 3 lines.
Right.
Um,
The
yeah.
other thing that I think is so important is we've all received things throughout the years. I used to produce fashion shows, and I would get these thank you notes from the model. They were not professional models, from the models, the organizers. I have every one of those in
Uh,
huge, folder. Well, I probably don't have everyone, but I saved a lot of them.
Yeah.
And if I'm feeling like blah, all you have to do is pick out something someone wrote about you 20 years ago.
Yes.
Yeah, look at that. I made a difference, or they had a great time because of something I did. I think that's also really important, to keep those notes that people do send you. I have, of course, probably shouldn't, but I have all the birthday cards and everything my kids and husband have given me. I have those.
Yes.
Too many of those I've saved, but
It's very hard to throw away kind thoughts about yourself. And I think, people say, well, can I just do this by email or text? And I will say, if you're simply not going to write the letter, then please do it by email or text. But I want you all to get a little bit brave, to just try this. You don't have to write a letter a day for a year, although it's a powerful experience if you would like, but just try it once. And there's something very nostalgic about handwriting. If you were to write to somebody from your past. So, Kim, our mutual dear friend, Kate, who you met, and when she was 12, when you were 12, I am sure you know her handwriting.
oh
And
yeah,
if you go to your mailbox and you open it up and you see a handwritten letter from Kate, and it's not your birthday and it's not a holiday, I mean, your energy has just soared before you even open it up, right? You all can remember your parents' handwriting. There's something beautiful about the written word. It is very nostalgic, and then we don't tend to ever throw these away, and it just becomes part of our keepsake pile. And I think that the handwritten letter, people say, oh, it's a lost art. Well, I would say it's really not, because everybody, everybody gets enjoyment out of receiving it. And one thing that I will add that has become, I think, super important for me in this journey of teaching people to write these letters, is that I never use the word thank you. And I think this is something very different about a letter of appreciation versus a thank you letter. Now, a thank you letter has a very important part in our society, so please keep writing those. But I want you to try to write these letters and not use the word thank you, because I think there's something, sometimes we hide behind that word. And when we have to say, here's what I appreciate you and why, it's a deeper level of gratitude. And it makes you think a little bit more about your word choice.
yeah, that's beautiful. I would agree with that. And it's so funny that you said that, because I had two other friends who sent me something randomly recently for no reason. I looked at their handwriting and it just brought me back to friends from not as long ago
Yeah.
as Kate, but as long ago as college. And it is very powerful and uplifting. You feel special. You feel motivated. You feel,
Absolutely.
yeah. There's one thing, gosh, this conversation is going so quickly, so many things. Well, one thing I wanted to say is, if people sometimes think they don't know who to write to, one of the chapters, or one of the things you said, and I did not know was attributed to whom you told me it was, which was Mr. Rogers, who has loved you into being.
Mm.
I first heard that phrase. I didn't know he made it up. I thought Danny Shapiro, who wrote the book Inheritance, she said in her book, this is just strikes me, having been found out I was adopted many years ago, but after I was grown, who loved you into being. I think my adoptive parents loved me into being.
Mm.
And I just simply love that phrase. And when I was reading what you wrote, it wasn't about parents. It was more about friends or acquaintances or other people who have loved you into the person you are today. I just love that.
Oh, I'm so glad, because that is exactly how I feel when I first saw that line. It just resonated with me, because, we didn't get here alone. All of our gifts, maybe our foibles, are a combination of the interactions that we've had along the way. And so, yes, I think it's wonderful that you think that your adoptive parents loved you into being. And I hope most people can feel that way about their parents. I know not everybody can. But I wrote in that chapter about one of my best friends. But it's mentors, teachers. And I think it's a beautiful exercise to think about who has loved you into being. And some people have told me that they feel more comfortable starting out this process writing to somebody who they are not particularly close to. And so if thinking about who has loved you into being might be a little too intimidating, then put that aside. And I hope you'll do it at some point. But write to somebody who you've had a positive interaction with, but don't know all that well. And it might feel less intimidating when you just get started on this process. You know, the barista at your favorite coffee shop, you know, the person who runs your neighborhood florist, the crossing guard for your kid's school, that sort of thing. Because there's just people everywhere. Once you start to linger, you can find people to appreciate wherever you go.
I agree with you so much. I have, I mean, I think about doing this and I do write letters. I do. We had a mailman who retired. We loved him. We wrote a note to give him some money. You know, it was just, it felt
Yeah.
good to appreciate him. And I think it's, I can find so many people. I don't think I have a problem with
Yeah.
it. I also wanted to say, as I was reading the book before I finished it, I was thinking I was going to ask you this question, but you answered it. And it was,
Yeah.
what do you think about writing to someone who has passed away? And then I get to the end of the book and there you go. You've written a letter, you know, and I think that can be so freeing and so powerful.
Mm.
And I don't mean freeing in an, I mean, I'm talking personally about like my parents who did love me.
Yeah.
But I also feel there's something cathartic about if I were to write this down, say, I forgive you for not telling me I was adopted because I love you no matter what. And what you gave me
Sure.
is so powerful. So I think people need to realize you can thank someone who is no longer on the earth plane as well.
Yes. You know, I knew when I started this journey that my first letter was going to be to our brand new grandson, and the last letter was going to be to my father, 33 years and 9 days after he passed away. And it was, well, I had an incredible experience with it. I don't know if you want me to share that or
I love
not, but
it. Great.
um, so you know, I thought all year long about writing what it would be like to write that letter on that last day, and I thought about what I wanted to do with it, and I knew that I wanted to read it out loud. And we are lucky enough to have some conservation land behind our home, and I thought that I would sit on a fallen log out in the woods and read him that letter. And when the day came, which was February 9th, 2020, um, I got a box of Kleenex and this beautiful picture of my dad. And I sat there at the kitchen counter and I wrote him a few kind words. And it was a very tearful but joyful experience. And then I put on my coat and sealed the letter and went out to get to the woods. And before I get to the woods, there's a lake that I walked by. And for some reason, I felt compelled to stop at this lake. Even though I had always imagined reading it further on in the woods, something just told me to stop at the lake. And it was an absolutely still day. I felt like I had stepped into a painting. It was absolutely bluebird sky and not a breath of wind. And I looked around to make sure nobody was coming. So they'd see this crazy lady reading a letter to no one. And then I read the letter out loud to dad. And the instant that I said my last words, the absolute instant, this incredible swirling wind came out of nowhere. It wrapped around me and around me. And it was so strong, I had to take a step back so I didn't fall over. My hair blew in my face. I had to hold the letter so it didn't blow away. And then it stopped again. And there is just no question in my mind that that was a beautiful wind hug from my dad. And I never expected to hear a response. Um, but I have tucked that away into that special place in my heart for the rest of my life. And I'm not suggesting to you that you are going to get a wind hug or something tangible like that. However, the sense of closeness and reconnection that I felt to my dad that's the precious part. And so I really want to encourage all of your listeners to think about who has passed in your life. And it's never too late. I mean, it was 3 decades for me. It's never too late to reconnect and and say anything from you know, I love you to I forgive you to I'm sorry to whatever it is that is in your heart. And I do believe that those who have left before us can receive it.
I do too. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
As we are closing our time together, I know that your goal is to create a kindness movement. And I know that some people listening will say, well, no, 365, I'm not going to do that. How
Yeah.
about one, two? I am a big proponent of starting slowly. maybe one letter,
Absolutely.
and
Yes,
find yourself going, oh, it's time for me to write that letter. Well, maybe I'll just write another one, and I mean, it doesn't matter. It doesn't, I'm one of those people who feels like, oh gosh, I have to do it all. I have to do it all. But
yeah,
you don't. Just do it slowly. 52 letters a year. You can do that. You can do that.
absolutely. Listen, if you write one letter, think about that. That is one letter of kindness that has gone out into this world to soften the rough edges of this crazy world we live in. But I'm gonna offer all of you a challenge, and that is to write a letter a day for 1 week. And if that's too hard, then okay. But if you're up for a little bit of a challenge, if you write a letter a day for a week, I just want you to then notice how you feel. What does it feel like when you're writing it? What does it feel like at the end of the day? Um, do you feel more connected? And what I found about myself is that I actually liked myself better. I liked who I was being when I shared kindnesses and appreciations. It made me feel when I got into bed at night that I had done something that was worthwhile today. So
Yeah.
I offer you that challenge, and just see how you feel, and know that you will be making a difference in your life and the life of somebody else.
Great. That's beautiful. Tracey, thank you so, so much for your time. Tell us where people can find you.
Well, I have a website, afewkindwords.net, and I would love it if you would look at the website. And it is just a joy and a pleasure for me to share my message with different groups of people, private gatherings, businesses, schools, nonprofits. So if this is a talk that might interest your group, please reach out through the website. And my book, The Power of a Few Kind Words, is available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. And I just want this world to realize that we have this superpower of kindness. And so please share my book with those around you.
Well, I loved it. I loved it. I can't wait to gift it to people. I think it's a very powerful, I think it's a wonderful idea to send your book with note cards to someone, even send a week's worth of stamps, a pretty pen and note cards. And what a
Yes.
great gift that is.
Well, I also do sell note cards on my website. So yeah, it does make for a lovely gift. And I've had some people actually write a letter of appreciation inside the front cover of the book and give it to somebody. So, but Kim, thank you for the beautiful work that you're doing and igniting a spark. And thank you so much for inviting me.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Thank you all for listening. I really hope that you take the very important words that Tracey has shared with us today, her words of kindness, and share your own few words of kindness, because it's not just going to ignite their spark, it's going to ignite yours. So I thank you now for tuning in, for listening, for sharing this episode, and for shining your light. I'll see you next week.